I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is coming back to center. And we get blown about by the winds of our social environment. And we're going to talk about how important it is to come back to center and remember ourselves. But before we get started, let's just take a deep breath in through your nose. Hold it and imagine clean, crisp oxygen just flooding your lungs, flowing through your bloodstream into your cells and your organs, and bringing vitality and life and health and vibrance. And as you exhale, exhale any tension and any stress. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine clean, crisp oxygen, just oxygen and light. This time, imagine this brilliant, brilliant, brilliant light lighting you up, every molecule, every electron, electrifying, energizing, and connecting you with the world beyond. And now, as you exhale, exhale any remaining stress and tension in your shoulders, in your back, your neck. And now let's just gently press our palms together and feel the sensation. Feel the sensation of your fingers moving along your palms, and feel the tingling and tickling in your palms. And let's bring ourselves present right here, right now. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning. So today we're talking about coming back to center. And I think there's so much going on right now in the world, and emotions and tensions are high, and we have so much to contend with that it's very easy to fall into anxiety or upset, fear, sorrow, anguish. There's a lot of emotional electricity in the air. And so it's really easy to get swept up into the emotions and reactions to what's going on and the stories that we tell ourselves. And it's so important to come back to ourselves, to our center, to be able to be making choices and acting from a place of balance. And good afternoon, Hope. So great to have you here. And welcome to everybody else. It's great to have you here too. So let's be navigating these very interesting times together. And one of the things that I realized about coming back to center and navigating the challenges of our world right now uh, is to remember to come back to center, to remember to check in and see how we're doing before, we end up on this runaway train where we're going down some kind of deep dark tunnel. To remember, oh, I can come back to myself. I can come back to a place where I put my attention on my breath, where I find myself here in this moment right now, that I can remind myself that right here, right now, I'm okay. It's Good morning, Dido. So glad to have you here as always. Um, so this remembering thing is such a critical piece, because when we remember that we have tools to be able to become present, then we can kind of do a pattern interrupt for whatever this pattern is of anxiety or fear, or whatever the emotions are that are kind of carrying us away. And so it's amazing how powerful it is to just be able to take a breath, and to remember to take a breath. And so I invite you to do that with me right now. Just like, let's take a really slow, deep breath. And actually, before we do that, check in to feel how your body feels before we do this. For me, I noticed that there's some some churning going on, and it's easy to get whipped up into a frenzy. We can do it for ourselves, or we can do it when we participate by watching news. Sometimes can put us over the edge. So just feel what's going on in your body. You know, like feel what's happening in your chest. Notice if there's any kind of vibrations happening in your body, if there's a place of extreme tension, or if there are places of discomfort, for instance. And now let's just take a moment to slowly take in a breath. And as you slowly take in that breath, imagine it going all the way into your belly, deep into your belly. And imagine it flowing up into your shoulders and allowing your shoulders to relax. And as you exhale, just allow the tension to flow out for a moment. And now just check in. And how does it feel? How does your body feel? I notice for me that the fluttering sort of feeling that I had in my chest has dissipated. I notice that my shoulders have just sort of lowered. And I'm wondering if you find that just the simple act of taking a deliberate and conscious breath can shift your state of being radically. I'm wondering if you can notice the difference you can make in your state with one very simple act. Because when we focus on the breath, especially if it's one breath, it allows us to redirect our attention to that breath, and therefore take our attention away from whatever it was we were using to create our panic or our sense of urgency or upset. So this is about coming back to center and remembering ourselves and making the distinction between ourselves and the influences of our environment. So when we come back to our breath, we're coming back to our experience, our internal experience. And that can enable us to distinguish ourselves and our own presence from all the turmoil around us. And it enables us in that breath to have a moment of choice about where we put our attention, and directing our attention to presence is actually our own salvation, because it allows us not to be at the effect of circumstance. It's an act of sovereignty, it's an act of will, to will ourselves back into being. So I'm envisioning these winds of turbulence all around us that whisk us away into their tide. And by taking a breath and feeling our being, our physicalness, by coming back to the presence of that, we create more solidity in ourselves, and we become less available for the winds of social insanity to sweep us up into their tides and their drift. So I'm wondering, I mean, there are lots of practices that we can use to bring ourselves back to center, but the breath, and a focused breath is probably the simplest and most profound uh, and immediate way to bring ourselves back to ourselves. Because what happens is we're allowing these influences around us to dismantle or disrupt our own energy field. So if you can think of yourself as this bubble of energy that's moving around, that it's not a self-contained bubble, it's self-contained to a certain degree, but it's in exchange with the environment all the time. And the more dense that energy bubble is, like the more concentrated, let's say, the more concentrated that energy bubble is, the less impervious it is to the external energies, right? The less exchange, or the less dissipated the concentrated bubble will be. So what I imagine is that if that bubble isn't concentrated, in other words, if we're not grounded and centered in ourselves, then there's more room for the outside to be disrupting and dissipating the energies of that field. And then it becomes pretty messy, right? It becomes dilute, and it becomes unclear, right? And when we center ourselves, the clarity that is available through that centered place is much greater than the mental clarity that we might or the mental lack of clarity as we churn and and get swept up in the energy of the crazy around us, right? So we can find that depth of centeredness, that core in ourselves as an anchor. And I mean anchor in a positive way, like a spiritual anchor, an anchor to our own knowing, to keep us from drifting, to keep us from uh, floundering in a turbulent sea of other other distractions and um, well, distraction's probably the best word. So what other things can we do to center? I mean, something as simple as coming back to sensation, focusing on the breath, that sensation, and the act of actually taking a long, deep, slow breath and exhaling that slowly, and deliberately slowing your breath slows the reactive mechanisms in our bodies. But we can also do that in other ways. Like, one of the things we do in the beginning of our sessions together is we rub our hands together and put our attention on that sensation, and that focus of attention, we can actually sink into that sensation. And these are things that we can do at any time, any moment. The trick is remembering to do them. Again, because the momentum of the moment, the momentum of emotion, the momentum of the crazy around us can allow us, or tempt us to allowing ourselves to be swept away by it. So sometimes in working with my clients, one of the things I have them do is set an alarm on their phone or whatever to remember to speak calming words to themselves, or to make an affirmation, or to take a deep breath, or to do some kind of practice that will bring them back to a place of balance and greater ease. And I think that this is such an important thing at this time. It's important to recognize the patterns that we have that generate those states of imbalance and discord within ourselves. And I know for some of us, it's watching the news or thinking about any number of different things in the world. When it's the old story about this guy who went to the doctor and he said, "Doc, it hurts every time I do this." And so the doctor says, "Well, then stop doing that." Like it's pretty simple. So what we get to do is look at the behaviors that we are doing that are getting us into a state of panic and anxiety and imbalance. And then we get to choose different behaviors to find different ways to approach those things, those behaviors. If there are behaviors that we don't have an option about, what we do have an option to do is potentially change our perspective on how we're doing those things. So um, changing the conversation about something really shifts the experience of it. And the judgments that we make about things, like if we say this is a crisis, then we by default need to get into crisis mode, right? Because crisis has certain attendant behaviors or certain bodily behaviors. If there's a crisis, it's going to mean that we're at high tension, that we have maybe a faster heart rate, that we have higher blood pressure. That crisis is calling us to an emergency state. Good afternoon, Liz. Welcome from London. So great to have you here. So if we define something as a crisis, then automatically what happens is we create tension in our body and our experience. So if we can lower the intensity of that word, instead of "Hi, Liz," instead of saying this is a crisis, we can say um, this is an unusual circumstance. And that may feel like it's whitewashing, but if you just listen to the words, if you feel into the words and you say this is an unusual circumstance, or this circumstance is calling me to respond in ways that are unfamiliar, that has a different tone to it than crisis, and it personally makes me feel like I have more room to respond. I'm wondering if you're experiencing the same thing and just looking at those words or listening, hearing those words to yourself, speaking them to yourself. So instead of "this is a crisis," this situation requires my concentrated attention. One of the things that's so powerful in shaping our experience is the questions that we ask of ourselves. And not only the internal dialogue, but the actual questions that we ask of ourselves. So, one of the things that we can do is ask positive generative questions of ourselves. So, what action can I take in this moment to feel better? What action can I take in this moment to find greater centeredness, to have greater ease? Um, as we ask empowering questions, our mind is kind of like a heat-seeking missile. It's really looking for ways to fulfill and to answer and to follow direction. So asking a positive or a generative question is really a way of directing our brain to come up with answers and solutions. That's kind of what it's there for. And so when we ask positive questions, we can we can generate a more empowered state of being. So I'm inviting us all to find a way to remind ourselves to come back to center, because right now, in this moment, in our world, we are called more than ever to be operating from a place of balance and centeredness, to be operating from a place of presence and awareness. And that means, first, keeping ourselves in a place where we are balanced and where we are connected to our greater wisdom, and that's through being centered. So I wonder if you have any other practices that assist you in coming back to that place of balance. um, I'm just thinking that there are so many things that we can do for ourselves. I know that nature is a tremendously powerful balancer for so many of us. And that's something that in these moments when we're confronted by so much information and so much to process, and there's so much going on outside of us, um, we get to we get to really exercise these capacities that we have. Liz says meditation, of course. I'm so sorry. That was, it was a given, and therefore I didn't even speak it, Liz. So thank you for that. Of course, meditation is another way for us to preserve our own well-being so that we can come forward and in our best selves. And Liz says learning off of others' spiritual experiences and helping others. That's such a good point, Liz. When we contribute to others, when we presence ourselves to contributing to others, to supporting others, it takes us out of ourselves and our um, inverted concern, and puts our energy outward. It allows us to be able to um, redirect our focus. So that's really powerful to do. And I also contend that the more balanced we are, the more impact we'll be able to have in the world and with helping others. So thank you for that. And thank you all for your commitment to be your best selves through very challenging times, to to um, to be operating from a place of love and connection and light. And so together we can and do make a difference. And let's just keep elevating ourselves to be able to elevate the world. So, with that, I'm so grateful to share this time with you. Thank you, thank you. And thank you for the light that you are in this world. We need you. We need every one of us together. And Liz says, my mom and sister came to me last night and I told them to touch my hands and their energy ripped through me. Wow, that's pretty awesome. Are your mom and your sister have they passed, Liz? Because the way you're speaking it, it sounds like they came to you like in a dream or in a meditation. And actually, if that's the case, we do have the ability to connect with people and energies from, the loved ones that we have in spirit. So Liz says yes, in spirit. So I think that's another brilliant resource, Liz, is to connect with our spiritual support. And this was before you went to bed. That's amazing. So in your waking state, we do have the ability in our waking state to connect with our spiritual supports, whether they're people have that we've known in our lives who have passed, whether they're other spirit guides, angels. People connect with all different energetic support. So that's another brilliant suggestion, Liz, is to connect with these guides and supports that we have on all different dimensions. It's beautiful, Liz, that you still have connection with your mom and your sister. That's beautiful. And so these are all resources we have to carry us through very challenging times. Let's make use of them. Let's shine our brightest. And I think that's it for today. I thank you so much for being here. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live every weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page. And it's such a pleasure and privilege. Please check out the other programming on Enlightened World. And I want to thank you guys for being here today. And Liz, I hope you come back so we can talk more about um, all of these interdimensional connections that you're addressing. So until next time, I just send so much love and compassion and just encouragement to remember to come back to your whole and loving heart.